You spent so much time being the storm that you forgot you can also be shelter. At some point in your journey, you believed you had to be strong all the time. That feeling was weakness. That crying was a mistake. That showing pain was surrendering to the enemy. But no one told you that by protecting yourself too much, you also closed yourself off. Rumi wrote, "Become the sky. Turn your back on fear. Fly." But what if the fear you need to turn away from is inside you? What if the sky you want to touch was covered by the clouds you created to survive? This isn't just another pretty phrase. It's a raw, spiritual, and urgent truth. The weary soul no longer wants to fight. It wants to rest. It wants to silence the pain. It wants to remember who it was before the world taught it to arm itself. Maybe you became the storm because no one was ever a shelter for you. Maybe you learned to defend yourself, to scream, to hide, because the love you needed never came safely. And then you believed, if no one protects me, I will become dangerous myself. But here's what no one tells you. Your soul doesn't want to be dangerous, it wants to be free. She wants to go home. And that home is her own heart. You feel it, don't you? The constant struggle, the emotional exhaustion, the feeling of always proving yourself, justifying yourself, trying to fit in with a world that doesn't understand your sensitivity. You say to yourself, I just want peace. But remember, the peace you want is not the absence of chaos outside. It's silence inside. It's a space where you can exist without having to defend yourself all the time. And that's why you're here. Because something in you, perhaps silent, perhaps desperate, still believes it is possible to return to yourself, that it is possible to stop being the storm that destroys and become the shelter that welcomes. It is in this sacred place between pain and surrender that Rumi whispers. He doesn't speak to your ego. He speaks to your soul, with the part of you that is tired of fighting, with the piece of your being that knows you don't need to fight to be loved. Just remember that you are already love. So listen with an open heart. Maybe for the first time in a long time. You are not chaos. You are not the abandonment you suffered. You are not the fear you felt when you were left. You are the space between the wounds. It's the sky behind the clouds. It is the silence that still pulses inside, begging to be heard. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest act of spiritual courage you can do right now. Stop running away from your own light. Stop treating yourself like a threat, and start to see yourself as a refuge, because that's what you are. No more storm, but the safe space where even the oldest pains can finally rest. Now, close your eyes for a second, breathe, and feel this truth slowly entering as if it were a gentle breeze after years of storm. Do you feel it? This call? That memory of who you always were before fear? So stay, because what comes next, it will touch exactly where your soul needs shelter most. If this beginning spoke to you, if some part of your soul felt recognized, write here in the comments, I am the refuge I have waited for all my life. Write as a silent commitment to your own healing, as a reminder that you no longer need to harden yourself to be strong, because true strength is being a shelter in a world that taught us to be a storm. And before I continue, I ask you, leave your like if this has ever made sense in your heart. And if this space touched something inside you, subscribe to the channel here. With each video, we walk together inwards, and each step is lighter when you don't walk alone. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next, it's something you might never have heard before, but that will explain why you've been feeling this way for so long. You feel like you're always at war with the world, but the most uncomfortable truth is that, most of the time, this war isn't out there. It lives inside you, and it's tiring. A silent exhaustion that doesn't show in your eyes but beats strongly within your chest. A battle between what you show and what you truly feel. Between the strength you display and the fragility you hide even from yourself. And maybe no one notices. Maybe you've learned to smile while bleeding inside. To say that everything is okay, when everything inside you is begging for a place to finally rest. Your soul is tired. Tired of fighting to be seen. Tired of molding yourself to please. Tired of carrying the weight of being strong, when all you wanted was someone to say, stop, you're safe here. But that someone never came. Or when they did, they were too broken to welcome you. And that's when you decided, I can't depend on anyone. I will be my own protection. I'll turn the storm around before anyone hurts me again. But deep down, down in the place where you rarely allow your conscience to go. You know, you didn't want to be the storm. You just wanted to not get hurt again. And this is the invisible pain, the one no one sees. The one you hide with competence, productivity, clever answers, and a spirituality that often becomes armor rather than healing. You talk about awakening, but you feel a growing emptiness. You say you're improving, but at night you cry without knowing exactly why. Maybe the problem was never the world. Perhaps it was the silent abandonment you learned to practice with your own soul. You forgot. You forgot what it's like to be kind to yourself, what it's like to breathe without fear, what it's like to trust, what it's like to surrender without calculating all the ways you could get hurt. And then you close yourself off. You create layers. You use pretty words as protection. You use spirituality as an excuse not to feel, not to face it. And she tells herself she's cured. But if it really was, why does it still hurt? What really hurts is not what the other person did. What hurts is how you had to transform yourself to survive this. You stopped being a shelter for yourself and became an exile. He exiled himself from his own tenderness, from the touch itself, from your own lap. And when the soul goes into exile, it begins to scream in ways the body tries to ignore. Anxiety increases, sleep disappears, anger explodes, or even worse, everything becomes numb, and you start to wonder if you're alive or just functioning. But listen to this, it's not your fault. You just learned what you were taught. He learned that being vulnerable is dangerous. He learned that feeling too much is a mistake. He learned that loving is too risky. And then he began to love halfway, living halfway, allowing yourself halfway. But there is a moment in the journey where the soul begins to call back what has been denied. And maybe this video is that moment for you. A mirror, a crack, a sacred space where you finally hear what has been silent for too long. The pain you feel is not spiritual failure. It's not weakness. It's just a sign that you're trying to be too human in a world that demanded you be made of stone. But Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters. So maybe, just maybe, you don't have to hide the wound anymore. Maybe it's time to look at it like you look at a portal, an invitation back to you. Because this invisible pain you feel is not here to destroy you. She's here to wake you up. Waking up from emotional torpor. Wake up from the constant struggle. Waking up from the belief that you need to be at war to be respected. You don't need to. You never needed it. His soul just wanted to be hugged. And now she's asking for it again. Begging with eyes that are tired of crying alone. Asking with skin that has become accustomed to enduring too much. Asking with the silence you've carried for years. It might be hard to believe that now. Maybe everything in you says it's not possible. But listen more carefully. There is a part of you that still waits. A part that still believes. A part that, even though tired, still wants to find rest within itself. And if you've made it this far, that part is still alive. And she's starting to remember who you were. Before the pain. Before the war. Before the storm. If this touched you in any way, if you felt that this video described something you didn't even know how to explain, write in the comments. I recognize myself in this invisible pain. This sentence could be the start of a new conversation. Between you and your own soul, you learn to react, attack, flee, not because you wanted to, but because you needed to. Because the absence of silent, genuine embrace left scars on you that were never properly seen. You didn't grow up surrounded by open arms. You grew up surrounded by absences, demands, haste, and misunderstandings. So you developed quick responses to survive in a world that didn't have time to listen to your soul. You learned to step forward before the other person left, to toughen up before anyone realized you needed a hug, to be a storm before they discovered how empty you felt. But what no one told you is that this behavior, this urge to constantly defend yourself, isn't a flaw. It's a defense. It's the result of a protective system your soul created to keep from breaking down completely. And maybe it works for a while, until the moment comes when you realize you're too tired, that the effort to maintain your armor is consuming you more than any external pain. And then, something inside you begins to whisper that there's another way to live. This is where the spiritual root of the pain you feel comes in. It's not just emotional, it goes beyond that. It's a profound disconnect between your essence and your reaction to the world. The pain doesn't just come from what happened to you. It comes from the way you were forced to forget who you truly are. Because you are not the storm, you are not the anger, you are not the rush, you are not the scream. You are the silence that exists before all of this. You are the calm ocean that was forgotten for fear of not being enough. Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." And it is by forgetting this that pain arose. Because by distancing yourself from your deepest nature, you began to seek outside yourself what has always existed within you. You began to seek approval, recognition, belonging, all outside. And you forgot that true belonging begins when the soul returns to inhabit its own body, when you allow yourself to feel, when you welcome yourself with the same affection you so often expected from others. But it's hard, I know, because living disconnected has become a habit, and this habit has built a narrative that you need to do a lot to deserve little, that you need to give yourself completely to receive crumbs, that you need to be constantly on alert, as if at any moment someone could abandon you again. This is the spiritual root of your fatigue, an existential fatigue, which cannot be cured by physical rest, a fatigue of the soul, which calls not for a break, but for reconnection. Healing spirituality isn't made of quick promises. It's made of deep memories. It takes you back to your origin, and your origin isn't the pain you've experienced. Your origin is the love that you are. But this love needs to be remembered, because it was erased by years of emotional abandonment, by words that diminished you, by looks that ignored you, by silences that hurt more than any scream. And now, all of this pulses within you as if it were still present when in fact, it's already gone. But your soul still reacts as if it were still there, as if it still needed to protect itself, as if it were still in danger. That's why you sabotage yourself. That's why you push away what's good. That's why you close yourself off when someone tries to get close, because something inside you still believes that opening up is dangerous. And that's why this awakening process needs to happen with compassion, not with guilt, not in a rush, but with a slow, deep return to your own truth. The truth that you no longer need to fight to exist, that you no longer need to prove anything to deserve love, that you no longer need to run from yourself. You just need to remember. Remember that your soul wasn't born for combat. It was born for encounter, for presence, for silence, for connection with the sacred that dwells within you, and that never left, even when you lost yourself. Pain, then, is the signal, the reminder, the call. When you feel something isn't right, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're far from your essence. It's because your soul is screaming for a return. And this return doesn't happen outside. It doesn't happen with others. It happens within. Every time you look at yourself without judgment, every time you take a deep breath and allow yourself to feel what you've always tried to silence, every time you choose not to react but to observe, every time you silence yourself and listen to your own truth, and in that listening, something begins to shift. You begin to realize that behind all the fear, there's an ancient desire for peace, a desire that dates back to childhood. From the first day you realized you needed to be someone to be accepted, but now you don't need that anymore. Now you can shed the masks, you can drop the weights, you can stop running, you can simply be. Be who you always were before you learned you needed to defend yourself. Be the refuge, be the home, be the ocean, be the calm after the storm, be the space where healing happens without noise, without pressure, without haste. If you felt that all of this spoke directly to something that was silent inside you, write here in the comments, "I reconnect with who I really am," because this sentence could be the first step towards a return that your soul has been waiting for a long time. What no one told you is that you no longer need to protect yourself, not the way you've been taught, not with that toughness you've donned like armor, not with that rush to walk away before being left, not with that strength that inside hurts. Life is no longer demanding this war from you. What your soul needs now is permission. Permission to rest, permission to trust, permission to simply be who you are, without fear of being hurt. Because what you built to protect yourself in the past, today prevents you from receiving what you desire most. You no longer need to be invincible. You no longer need to justify yourself. You no longer need to prove you deserve love. You no longer need to chase after those who insist on not seeing you, because what you sought outside has always been within you. The peace that seemed unattainable, the presence that was missing, the embrace that never arrived. All of this lives there, in the quietest space of your soul. And it's precisely this space you've been trying to avoid, because it feels empty, because it feels scary, because it demands surrender. But it's in this place that healing begins. The silence you fear is the same silence that can save you. It's not absence, it's not abandonment, it's not punishment. Silence is the language of your soul, and the soul screams at first because it hasn't been heard for too long. But then, it whispers, it soothes, it shows, it reveals. And what it reveals is the key, a hidden, sacred key, not found in any book, in any advice, in anyone else. This key can only be found when you stop running, when you accept being exactly where you are, when you look within without fear of what you'll find. What you find in this moment of profound honesty is not weakness, it's truth. It's the truth of a woman who carried far more than she needed to, who loved when no one loved back, who believed even when everything told her to give up, who gave too much, and now feels the weariness of a soul that was never fully embraced. But now, something has changed. Now you're beginning to see that this story doesn't need to continue being told the same way. Now you're beginning to understand that your healing isn't in what happened, but in what you choose to do with it. You are not what was done to you. You are what you decide to do with it now. And that decision doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest. And the most healing truth you can accept today is, you are the refuge you've been searching for. You are the space where your soul can finally stop fighting. You are the temple where all your wounded selves can find peace. You are the light you were trying to light from the outside, the strength you sought in other arms, the answer you begged the world to bring to you. But none of these things come from outside, because no one can give you what you still refuse to acknowledge within yourself. As long as you continue to treat yourself as a threat, no one can see you as home. As long as you continue to judge yourself, no one can truly welcome you. As long as you continue to wait for others to bring you peace, the silence within you will remain noise. It's the moment you say, enough, I'm coming back to myself. It is at this moment that something changes. Not outside, inside. You begin to realize that there's power in softness, that there's protection in vulnerability, that there's courage in simply being. And when that happens, the energy shifts. You no longer need to explain. You no longer need to ask. You no longer need to beg for love, for validation, for space. Because you've given yourself all of this. Because you've recognized in yourself what you've spent your life trying to find in others. The awakening soul begins to remember. And by remembering, you stop hurting yourself. You stop repeating. You stop attracting what hurts. Because you no longer identify with the pain, but with the light that exists behind it. The pain was just the invitation, the memory, the call back, not to a place, but to a state of presence, a state of silent love, a state of surrender. And this surrender isn't giving up, it's freedom. It's the conscious choice to no longer carry what was never yours, to no longer feed the stories that told you you were hard to love, to no longer continue in cycles that only confirm old beliefs about rejection, abandonment, and loneliness. You are not the woman who needs to beg to be chosen. You are the woman who, by choosing herself, becomes the space where all that is true flourishes. You are the garden after the drought. You are the shelter after the storm. You are the soul that, even though wounded, chose not to give up on feeling. And as much as the world doesn't understand this, you know, deep down, you know. You know it's time to stop running from yourself. You know that the time has come to no longer run away from silence, because in that silence lies your answer. Live your key. There lives peace that does not depend on anyone. If this moment made sense to you, if somewhere in your body, your memory, your feelings, these words touched you deeply, write here in the comments, I am the silence that heals. Because this phrase could be the beginning of a new kind of listening. A listening that comes from the soul, and the soul never forgets when it's truly heard. Perhaps you're in exactly that place today, in a relationship where you constantly need to prove yourself, where your worth seems constantly on trial, where every loving gesture becomes an emotional negotiation, where the other person's silence hurts you more than any angry word. Perhaps you've learned to interpret crumbs as care, empty answers as presence, sporadic attention as affection. And because of this, you constantly find yourself in a fighting position, fighting to be seen, fighting to be remembered, fighting to be a priority in the life of someone who doesn't even know what true love is. You wake up and already feel the weight of having to conquer a space that should naturally be yours. You tell yourself you understand, that it's just a phase, that that person also has traumas. But deep down, you know you're betraying yourself. Because every time you diminish your feelings to fit into the world of someone who will never see you fully, a part of you crumbles inside, and that part doesn't scream. It remains silent. It hopes that one day you'll choose to return to it, that you'll choose to care for it, that you'll choose to stop abandoning yourself for the sake of a connection that never truly embraced you. Maybe you're in that phase where the relationship has already ended, but your mind still relives the conversations, the promises, the wounds. The other person's absence hasn't brought relief, only a new kind of pain. The pain of realizing you're still emotionally attached to someone who didn't hold you when you needed it most. You wonder where you went wrong, what you did wrong, why it wasn't enough. But what if the truth is, the mistake was never yours? What if the mistake was simply continuing to love someone who never had the capacity to receive you with their whole heart? This is where many get lost. In this confusing territory between love and need, between attachment and hope, between the desire to be loved and the fear of being alone. But there's a key within all of this. A key that only appears when you stop searching outside and start returning to yourself. And this key has a name: self-recognition. When you recognize yourself as a shelter, as a sacred space, as a living soul deserving of more than emotional crumbs, something begins to change. Not quickly, not magically, but silently and truly. You begin to realize that you no longer need to beg for presence, that you no longer need to chase explanations, that you no longer need to decipher confusing messages or tolerate absences disguised as freedom. You begin to remember that your soul wasn't born to be a beggar for love. It was born to be a temple, and no one builds a temple chasing after someone who only knows how to tear down pillars. And then, one ordinary day, in a seemingly banal moment, you feel it. You feel as if something inside you has stopped, as if the war has ceased, as if the need to prove something has vanished. You no longer need to respond to unanswered messages. You no longer need to justify yourself. You no longer need to constantly offer yourself up, because for the first time you understand, I am no longer the storm. I am the shelter that shelters my own soul, and that changes everything. Not because the other person changed, but because you changed, because you chose to break out of the cycle, because you decided to see yourself, because you finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself, that maintaining a connection can't cost you peace, that being with someone only makes sense if your heart can breathe in that space, and if it doesn't, then it's not love. It's an emotional prison disguised as a bond. It's emptiness with embellishment. You start saying no, without guilt. You start walking away from conversations that once held you back. You start staying silent without feeling guilty for not responding right away. You start realizing that your energy is sacred and that not everyone deserves access. You stop trying to fix what didn't ask to be broken. And most importantly, you stop trying to rescue people who chose to drown. And do you know what's most beautiful about all this? It's not the absence of the other. It's the presence of you within yourself. It's the reunion. It's the return to your inner home. It's the moment you look in the mirror, perhaps still with tears in your eyes, but with a new attitude and say, I'm not leaving myself anymore. And you don't. Because something in you has strengthened. Because you discovered that the love you sought so long was the love you now offer yourself. This isn't theory. It's real. It's happened to many women. Women who grew tired of adapting. Women who decided to stop bleeding from shallow relationships. Women who, even trembling, said enough to everything that made their souls cry for help, and who are now building, day after day, a new way of loving. A love that begins from within. A love that doesn't shout but sustains. A love that doesn't demand but embraces. A love that doesn't hurt but heals. And if you've made it this far, perhaps you're at the exact point where everything begins to change. Maybe this is your moment of awakening. Maybe your soul has been waiting for this very moment to breathe a sigh of relief and say, now yes, now you're coming home. If this story spoke to you, if you saw yourself in these words as someone who recognizes themselves after years of forgetting, write here in the comments, I come back to myself. This phrase isn't just an affirmation, It's a silent decision to break the cycle, to choose oneself, to finally become one's own home. You no longer need to fight to be loved. This understanding doesn't come all at once, it doesn't happen magically, but it emerges gradually, like the soft light that enters through the crack of a window you didn't even remember existed. First, it comes as an inconvenience, then as silence, until one day it comes as a revelation, and this revelation transforms everything. Because you begin to realize that the love you fought so hard for, the love you begged for in unspoken gestures, the love you sought in eyes that never knew how to see you, this love was always asking to be recognized within you, not outside, within. Rumi said, "Close the door of anger, open the window of love." And that sounds simple, but it's not, because you've spent too much time harboring anger without realizing it. Anger at absence, anger at rejection, anger at always being the one who loves more, who gives more, who insists when everyone else has already left. Anger at being ignored, abandoned, replaced. Anger at yourself for accepting so little. And all of this accumulated. It became a layer. It became a lump in your throat. It became tension in your body. It became anxiety disguised as independence. But now, you can stop. Now you can choose another path. You are the space where healing happens. This is the most powerful truth your soul can hear right now. Healing isn't in the return of someone who left. It isn't in the apology that never came. It isn't in the recognition of someone who wasn't mature enough to love you. Healing is within you. It's in the moment you say, "I don't need this anymore to be complete." It's the moment you stop fighting the past. The moment you silence the urge to prove something to those who never wanted to understand you. The moment you decide that your worth will no longer be measured by the eyes of others. The storm was just a cry for love, a desperate plea from a part of you that just wanted to be embraced, just wanted to be seen, just wanted to be loved as you are. But what no one taught you is that this cry no longer needs to echo, because now you have awareness. And with awareness comes choice. The choice to no longer react as before. The choice to not hurt yourself trying to understand what has no explanation. The choice to no longer beg where your worth is ignored. The choice to be a refuge. Being a refuge isn't about hiding. Being a refuge is about becoming the safe place you've always sought. It's about transforming yourself into the presence you've been missing. It's about offering yourself the embrace you've longed for from others. And the moment you do this, something changes from the inside out. You begin to move differently, to relate differently, to choose more truthfully, and most importantly, to not accept less than you deserve. And here begins the shift in consciousness. Because before, you believed you needed to be perfect, intense, and sufficient all the time to deserve a crumb of attention. Now, you understand that your mere existence is a miracle in itself, that you don't need to compete, mold yourself, or bend, that you don't need to hurt yourself to fit into stories that were never about you. Peace isn't about being loved by everyone. It's about being loved for yourself, unconditionally, in being true to what you feel, in being loyal to your own truth. This turning point is also a break. It breaks ties with versions of yourself that still beg to be saved. It breaks ties with wounds that no longer match the woman you're becoming. It breaks the need to convince, to explain, to justify. You no longer need to fight, because you remember that love isn't war. Love is home. Love is rest. Love is silence that embraces, not absence that hurts. Love is when your soul can exist fully, without fear of being too much, without fear of being too little. Of course, there will still be difficult days. There will still be triggers, relapses, burning memories. But even on those days, you will be different, because you will have chosen to return to yourself. And that decision, even when it sways, remains. Because when the soul awakens, it may even be silent for a moment, but it never completely sleeps. It knows the way back, and it returns. It always returns. And with each return, it is stronger, more aware, more free. Being a refuge is, above all, being true. And truth has a power that no pain can erase. You may have been rejected, ignored, forgotten, but now you see yourself. And when a woman sees herself, no one can take her away. She can cry, yes, but she cries standing up, with her soul standing up, with her heart rebuilding. with the awareness that pain came to heal, not to define who she is. This is the woman you are becoming. And this woman doesn't scream. She vibrates. She doesn't beg. She emanates. She doesn't plead. She chooses. She chooses what her soul asks for. She chooses what honors her story. She chooses what keeps her whole. And in this process, she becomes more and more a home. For herself, for others, for the world. She understands that she no longer needs the love that hurts, the presence that weighs, the touch that demands. She is self-sufficient, because she understood that the greatest encounter in life is the reunion with one's own essence. If this turn of events spoke to you, if at some point during this silent listening something awakened within your soul, write here in the comments, "I am the love that heals me." Because sometimes all a soul needs to keep going is to see itself reflected in words that finally say what it has always felt. This phrase isn't just symbolic. It's a seal, a commitment to your process, a reminder that from now on you no longer need to lose yourself to feel loved. And if this touched you, if it made sense deep down in your heart, subscribe to the channel. This journey does not end here. She's just getting started. And I will be here every step of the way, with every healing word, with every truth that reconnects you with who you really are. Also, leave your like if this video was a mirror to your soul. Now the next video is already appearing on your screen. He is the continuation of that path. Watch, feel, allow yourself to continue. You are not alone. Never was.